magic. It's on its way. This was a title that was given to me a day ago. And when I was about to come onto screen, I was contemplating the vision of what this is. So what we're going to talk about is the nature of those souls who are saying to themselves, my life sucks and there's no way around it. And they don't want to hear the magic of who I am, and they don't want to hear what I have to say, and they don't want to hear any of the words of wisdom that I bring through. This is what I'm dealing with in many ways in my own family. And yet I keep my spirits lifted by aligning with those who honor not only who I am, but who they themselves are if they are watching in this world. They understand that not all magic is made for all of us, right? I got told right before coming on that the title really should be now, The Moment is Magic. And in fact, it was a reassuring message from my own soul saying, the moment is magic, Brenda. And it's true. But when we get disheartened by those souls who don't believe in who we are, even if we're in this idea of, I just feel a certain way, or I'm embodying a certain characteristic that people are not necessarily aware of or fond of, and they don't see it as beautiful. They see it as a threat to their own individuality when we realize that we're all connecting on various levels of love. And that's the nature of what some people's magic is, some people's misery, right? In the mindset only most often. I'm not hurting anyone with my mind, am I? Am I telling you how to be? Am I projecting pain onto the universe? Some of us are very much saying these words of wisdom, assuming people themselves can see the beauty of who they are. And yet when we ask ourselves, why do I feel so magical in my moments? It's because I know how to connect to my own heart and say to myself, I love who I am always, whether I feel good in the moment or not. And it's a process of love that carries us through the days and the evenings and the weekends when we aren't necessarily feeling our best. This can happen. And then I could turn on a tune, right, and feel better. This is why we often utilize other words of wisdom or the music of the moment to help us, enlighten us to the nature of being free of those who condemn us for being magical beings of love and light, right? The light beings of soul are still there in their vision, and yet we understand Brenda's more of the neutrality vision versus I don't want to keep seeing things as dark and light. I just accept them for what they are most often. And I play with the moment's majesty, right? I'm more about understanding that what I once thought was dark is now more reflective of who I am in my own way based on the perspectives of others. If I myself feel my victimhood, how is that any different than anybody else? I wind my way up out of it most often, loving who I am, cherishing my magic with my soul that brings me wisdom beyond most people's imagination. Definitely beyond my years here on this plane. I never would have thought I would have been this good, is what some people would say. You're all there enjoying your lives, correct? It's not about the lives of happiness, but it can be filled with it if we look into our hearts and ask ourselves what's holding us back from feeling the beauty of who we are, even when those around us doubt us for our abilities, our gifts, and our wisdom. I believe in you is where Brenda goes. I believe every experience you've ever had, whether it sounds like it's out there in outer space or whether it's an internal feeling of beauty that you receive from your loved ones, or whether it's the idea of my horror came to me within. We are here to experience the dimensional shifts, is where I am. I don't just feel one way all the time. And I wouldn't expect that of anyone else. I'm not walking around on a cloud 24/7. But when I'm with my soul in a place of comfort and love, it can very much feel that way. And sometimes I feel like, oh, I've lost my gifts, right? I'm fluctuating in my beauty is where I'm at. And that's what I want you all to understand is when we fluctuate in our beauty, right? It's not that the beauty is gone. It's that the moment is not as we had hoped it to be. And so that's the expectation of honesty that we all have to portray ourselves as understanding it. I was hoping for a better experience with my love life, is where some are. I was hoping for a better experience in my career or my fantasy world. Brenda plants trees of fantasy in her moments. She is literally the rock of so many souls' understanding, bouncing here and there and everywhere. From idea to idea is what some people would say to her. You aren't focused on where you're supposed to be, as if my life turned out the way that I thought it was going to be. Had I listened to everyone who ever doubted my wisdom and my gifts, do you think I would have ended up where I am? Where I'm able to bring through source wisdom for anyone on this plane who ever desires to have that? For their own hopes and dreams to be brought to them by their own soul's wisdom, whether or not they care to hear from that kind of soul wisdom or not. And that was the lesson of learning and love for me, is to respect those boundaries that people are placing in their minds about what is or isn't appropriate for them in their moments. And when we joyfully create and combine, it's a magical experience. And others will say, this is terrorizing for me because I don't understand it, or I don't want to understand. And that's the hardest lesson of all, is when those around us say, I don't even care about your vision. I just want you to be happy. And what that means to some people is, I have to people please you in order to make you happy, right? And that's what we don't do. We don't expect people around us to make us happy, but we do have to cherish our hearts when we ourselves are saying, but you aren't even aware of who I am. Do you want to know who I am? How many are looking out at the world and saying, who cares who I am? Right? Isn't that what most people are saying? How many people are looking for people who just want to understand who they are? Put up their dukes is where I go with some of my friends. They say, I love you for who you are. I just don't need to know who you are. You see, I was the sheltered one in my mind, always taking the beatings for those souls who said, I love you for who you are. And yet when I changed my wisdom to one of love of self, in the extreme form of it, in some people's mind, by saying, I'm healing my heart, my soul, and my wisdom flies free from the nature of who they think I need to be, then all of a sudden the story turned, and people start to get threatened by the nature of what I was bringing through. Words of wisdom about how we created, about how we are creating moving forward. Do I want to cherish who I am first and foremost? It's almost guaranteed that that's where most people need to be in order to do this kind of work where you say, I love who I am, I love who I am. And know that in essence, our hearts have always been there with others. It's just they didn't necessarily see the vision as loving for me. You see, everyone assumes they know what's best for other people. We always assume that we've got some perspective that they themselves should be cherishing from our own wisdom. And that might be the case for many souls. I've listened to so many souls' unique, beautiful perspectives that it caused some concern for me at one point. I can't take care of your hearts like I used to, is where I'm at. I can't be responsible for your emotional outburst or the choices that you're making in your lives. I can't put all of my energy into your magical moments when you are not putting your vision and magic into mine. Okay? And it can feel like that give and take of love and comfort and adoration. But that's what happens on a soul level as well. We come into our hearts and we say, I love you, set me free. That's where Brenda was with certain souls. I love you, set me free. Brenda, I love you, set me free. She didn't let go. She said, I know we don't create well together and I still love you. I just can't handle the victimhood that you're creating with me. Because that's a different kind of soul session. So when we say to ourselves, what kind of magic am I bringing to this moment? Often it can be the simplicity of loving yourselves dearly, honestly, sincerely, carefree visions of love, wanting to come through saying, I adore you for you. And yet it's not about hearing that from the outside world for the most part. It's when you hear it from inside, within your own soul's beating heart, that you start to realize that's where my magic begins. It's in my heart and my soul. And I cry at night for those who aren't able to tap into that nature and see me as them, creating beauty whenever I can, wherever I can, if at all possible. And so when I look into the eyes of a loved one and see how they are disappointed in who I am, it's tragic for those of us who understand that. I love you more than anything. I can't be your savior. That's where some of us go. Others are saying, what does that mean, Brenda? I'm here to do the health and wellness of many souls. I can bring forth your soul's vision of victim that is causing you pain in your heart or in your body. But I can't do it for those who are so limited in their hearts that they think that there's something scary about who I am or wisdom denied. That's another soul that I know that says wisdom is denied. Because they don't believe that people are here to save everybody else either. Okay? We're on this tragic ship of pity and pain, but why don't we lighten our load a little bit and say, I understand where people are. They want to have fun without me being who I am. I put on the mask of majesty sometimes, or the mask of mastery of my own heart, when I look inside and say, I wish they understood who I was when I did this process. You see, I went through a painful process at some point, but the magic was always there. Once I acknowledged the beauty of the messages that were coming through, not only for myself, but my loved ones, and those even that are on the screen who I do indeed adore, whether or not they agree to see me for who I am. Some will say, you cause issues, Brenda, with your words of wisdom, and that may be the case. Sometimes this vision of love says, I have a political ideal that I would like to bring through from some of those souls who are participating in that ideal. I reunited with the soul of Biden recently as a support system for his soul, and he gave me his support in return when it was needed. Grateful for those souls that come through. As Brenda has said, I honor all souls, whether you agree with them politically or not. I've done most souls' visions a disservice, is what some would say, not abiding by their Christian visions, which is basically one way of saying, I understand the disappointment that we have in the progress that we're making moving forward in certain visions of love, of comfort, and honesty. I'm not here just to tell people what they want to hear. But most often the magic does come in that kind of magic moment where people start to open up to their eyes to the issues that are either enlightening us to who we are or holding us back in our hearts from aligning with the love of all, which is where we all are in our hearts, whether or not we know it for the most part. Some planes of development are definitely not in that vision, this one being one of them. We don't have to acknowledge that to everybody. We don't have to acknowledge that they are magic in the making, because that's who we are when you come into the vision of my soul is creating with those that I love and adore, whether or not they agree with my vision or my wisdom. But I could appreciate their perspectives of love for who they themselves are, seeing themselves as separate from who I am. It's the separation in the minds that we create with, because it gives us a guaranteed safety net most often. I don't want to be afraid of who I am. I don't want to be afraid of who you are. This is where many of us are here, because it is the issue at hand. And so if we could open up our hearts and our minds to the possibilities that others may have some perspectives that are actually pretty helpful for us when we're aligning with the vision of I love who I am and I always will and I never will deny that vision. Brenda has embodied a soul that is so strong in her self-love and love of worth that she does not deny it for anybody else either. You are so strong in your being, you don't even know it, is what she would say to you. You have never faltered in your vision, for this moment is of protection, is what some would say. But the protection is more about the fear of the unknown. And that's what she is usually working with when people say, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to be uplifted into the vision of the memories of my family and my friends being all that and more. And yet, it is that moment. What happens with Brenda is her heart is so strong for her family and her friends that she can't hold back the emotions when those souls come through very often. Some are here to take the damage that she brought through and to process some of those words when she gave them their soul's wisdom. It was wisdom. They were not processed properly, is what some would say. You see, many of us are assuming that the love of all means that I please all. That's not the case, is it? Does it hold me back from being my own soul, sovereign being? Or does it mean we work together to straighten out the differences, to work out the facts of the moment, which is where others are striving for? Okay, others are striving for the facts of the moment. Where's my magic, Brenda? It's all within if you can create it. Others will have such a difficult time believing in the idea that their lives are magical, whether or not they're in pain or not, or whether they're in the throes of passion, or the witnessing of events of majesty around us that others are denying are existing there. Open your eyes to what's actually going on around us, is what some people would say, focusing on the negativity in their lives rather than the positive beauty of projection of beauty. I know how to walk through my community and see the beauty, is where many will go. I know how to look at a family of poverty and see the beauty of war-torn countries, right? Others are more focused on the war-torn countries. Do you know what the wisdom is for those of us who are on this spiritual path of enlightenment? Because it's mostly spirituality that I vibrate in for the most part, with a little bit of psychology mixed in for good measure. We highlight the visions that are not feeling so good, or where there are issues to be handled or addressed. But we focus on the areas where life is plentiful, life is beautiful, life is just life. And we can see the beauty in the world where there are no wars happening in the moment, where there is no displeasure, right? We're not talking about a utopian ideal. We're talking about the reality of people going about their lives in the ways in which they do, creating conflict in certain situations, sure. But that's the lesson of growth, right? How do we grow in our conflict? The perspectives we get when we age, perhaps, and we realize, oh, I thought I had it all figured out when I was younger, right? The magic of youth, it comes back to us where we start to say, why am I so serious about the world when my world is what? Falling apart? It's not falling apart, it's discovering itself with all of us and each of us breath by breath. How's that for beauty? We're not alone in creating this universe. We're not alone in creating this plane. Are we not looking to our animals for the beauty in which they bring us? Those on this plane are very much in line with the idea of my animals are cherished forever. And so are the bees. You see, that's where Brenda goes to the nature of the consciousness of what we create. Can you not look into the beautiful streams and say to yourself, look at that magical wonder that's been winding its way through the majesty of the mountains for eons? Potentially, depending on the stream, of course. It depends on where we are. Centuries is what they wanted to come through with, because that was where she was in her mind. She heard the vision. And this will tell you how the vision of her soul can come through and say, it's a correction in the play on words. So what we're wanting people to do is to align with the idea that life doesn't have to be difficult or easy or even valued before their magic is shown to them on the other side of the veil. This is what many are coming into contact with, which is this idea that the veil of illusion drops and we can see for ourselves who is or isn't necessarily on our side, right? No, that's where the issues get worked out most often. And so when I hear certain souls that are saying, I'm going to create this vision with you to see if it feels right for you, we can often hear the displeasure from those on the other side who are saying, why are you caretaking my heart when you don't really care for me on this plane? The battlefield of soul is where Brenda has found herself sometimes, telling those souls, we are not connecting on the soul level. If you yourself think that you're better than I am, That's what she grants you. There are others who would say, I'm better at you at this. Beautiful. Grab onto your gifts. Grab onto your abilities, your talents, your wisdom. Show us your wisdom is where she is. I'll show you mine. I don't play games on the mind with most souls. I have a couple of souls that I'm still working out some issues of prosperity with. And that means that I'm not here to tell you how to win the jackpot of soul, but that's where I go. That's what I did. I made sure I covered my tracks, is where someone on the field of dreams is. They covered their tracks. Brenda doesn't want you guys to go down her path of discovery because in essence, it's your own paths of discovery that come through. You cannot do what I did, and I cannot be you and do what you have done. So let's not compare apples to oranges. But let's just understand the beauty is in the understanding that we're all here doing these amazing things for each other, to enlighten each other to the nature of who we are, to the nature of what we're doing, and how we're being. I like to just sit and wonder about the world sometimes. Other times I'm making myself a heady cup of tea. There's another soul celebrity that wants to come through and says this woman vibrates in the ecstatic state very much so very often and doesn't even realize it, that it is an attraction zone for so many souls, because she knows how to do that vision from a place of love of herself first, rather than trying to gain attention through the male attributes of her vision. She's not trying to create an attraction zone with her body or her mind. She is literally, I just want to be left in peace. But my peace is in my beauty of my body, in my soul, and in my heart and mind. I don't want others thinking that ecstatic states of awareness means that you've arrived at the destination of all destinations, but it's pretty much a great one to land on, okay? So with that, we want you all to think about where your focus is, who you are in contact with, and what are they showing you about you? Not them, but you. I must not agree with that person for some reason. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that it's not your cup of tea in this moment. It doesn't mean that it won't be at some point or that it ever will be, and that is okay. We're here to have a journey of discovery, not of adversarial encounters for the most part, right? And that's what's beautiful about it. Some of us do come here to create adversarial disputes about whose vision is the best or whose vision is more enlightened than another, as if anyone could tell anyone else that their vision is more enlightened for them than their own soul. And that's what Brenda brings to you. Your souls are beautiful for you. Enlighten them to who you are. Spread your joy, spread your wisdom, spread your despair if that's where you are. I've had my own moments of it. I cherish my life always. I had some rough spots that were hard to handle, but it gave me perspective on the good times that I wouldn't have had I not gone through those moments. It enlightens me to the nature of who I actually like to spend time with. It enlightens me to the nature of who I am from various planes of development as well. I love psychology in its basic form of we are of the mind, and the mind has its pleasant surprises for us. But I'm also of the wisdom of my health and healing means I don't diagnose myself with mental health conditions at this moment in time, nor did I ever for the most part. I did at one point when I was younger go into the vision that I needed some extra help with my sadness over tragedy that I had experienced. But then I wound my way up into that idea of the spectrum of my emotions. And that's the beauty of it. Do you know what it's like to open up to the spectrum of our hearts, or the spectrum of our emotions, or the spectrum of it's like the heart souls. We have souls who ride the spectrums of love, and they love that vision of it because it means I'm not comparing myself to anybody other than my own feelings in each and every moment. Who brings me joy? I do. I make the choices that allow me to experience joy. Now, some of us are indeed creating with those souls who have more of a control aspect around who they are. And others are saying, but I was fearless in my soul mate pursuit. And then they got a little bit disappointed. Someone on the line is disappointed in their soulmate pursuit. Your pursuit of another is more about the alignment of your minds, your hearts, and your wisdom. And when we see people not performing as we would want them to perform, perhaps, we often say, I love you for who you are, even if you're not performing the play that I want you to play. Right? It's an act, is what some people would say about who I am, not understanding the vibrational being that I inhabit when I am on the screen and off the screen. I am not disconnected from who I am as soul. I am not an enlightened state of being at one point and then I go off and I go do something else and I don't feel the impact of my body with my soul. My soul has told me I am there permanently because of who I am, what I've done, and my experiences all of my life. My experiences all of my life told me I was doing this work already, and that my soul said she was chosen to do this kind of vision questing with certain souls. I'm not in a pursuit for a soulmate, but that's where I'm at in my mind without knowing it. And when I do that vision, people start to perk up a little bit, thinking, oh, she doesn't even realize how much she's in the mindset of I'm in pursuit. It's about what she experiences and what she hears from her soulmates of past and of future. Okay? That's how strong it is for her. And when people can finally unlock the keys to the wisdom of our hearts, we start to understand why it might be a little considerate to hope that those who feel the despair of the moment, like there's no one for me on this plane, or there's no one that's ever going to understand me for who I am, don't doubt that you have your own soul's wisdom coming to you, telling you that you're loved and adored, and you do have your loved ones with you always, surrounding you with love most often without us even knowing it. Now others are very much afraid of that vision, thinking they're walking around. And it's not like that. But for those of you who are in the despair moment of I'm alone and I'm not loved or adored or cherished by anyone at this moment, just realize that there is someone on the line for you saying that you're cherished and adored and your wisdom is being acknowledged as hardcore in the mind for many. So there's someone in the mind who's saying this is a hardcore woman. I know how to go to that place when I am feeling more, it's like sensual but seductive, and these processes that we can go through are very instrumental in bringing through magic for many people, but we rarely hear people talk about them because it's taboo to think that somehow our future is coming to us and yet we're not supposed to hear it, right? Those magic moments are cherished for those of us who can project ourselves into the future and say, yes, I love you and I understand why you're coming to me. That's how simple it can be sometimes. To hear those souls say those words of comfort. And that's the magic and the mystery of soul. So with that, I want to say thank you for watching. And if you want to, please subscribe, like, follow. And if you feel like you have a question, feel free to contact me and I can answer it perhaps in a future video. And I'd like to remind everyone something that my soul told me. Remember, stay curious, wise, and soulful. Have an amazing day.